Today I am going to teach you why Passover doesn't mean Passover. What are you saying, Ron? Yeah. Well, am I going to change a centuries-old understanding of the meaning of this holiday that we're getting ready to end in? I think it's Friday night we start this year, this coming Friday night. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to take you little by little, and I think it's going to be exciting. And I also want you to learn something in this. How to properly do a word study. What do I mean by that? The other day this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. You know, Dr. Michael Brown used to say when he was my instructor that sadly most of the time when a preacher says, this means this in the original Hebrew, they're wrong. Most of the time. Because most of the time they've gone to strong concordance or they don't really understand how to do a word study. Just because a word means something in a different passage doesn't mean it means that in your passage. You got to do a little bit more homework. And we're going to do that today. I'm going to show you how to do a word study because we're going to do it on the word Pesach. What does it mean? That's where we get the word Pesach, which we call Passover. And we're not going to do it just to do it because the meaning, the true meaning, I believe is super powerful. Okay, so again, we get the word Passover because of the belief that God passed over the homes in Egypt instead of, that had the blood on the doorpost instead of killing the children. And, but I want to ask, did God pass over those homes? I'm going to say no, he did not. Now, before you turn off your Facebook, just hang with me because, again, this is powerful. Now, the word Pesach, that's in the chapter, Exodus chapter 12. It's in there, I think, 3 times. And I'm just going to read that right now from verse 23. Let me read from Hebrew. Va'avar Adonai lingof et Mitzrayim vera'a et hadam ala mashkof va'al shtei muzazot u'pasach, there's that word, pasach Adonai el ha-petach velo yiten ha-mashchit, it's also another important word, lavo el ha-betchem lingof. When the Lord goes to the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the tops and sides of your... There is a bug there, forgive me. One of the plagues coming. He will see the blood on the tops and sides of your door frames and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter into your house. Now, first thing you ask yourself is if he passes over, how is that going to prevent the destroyer from entering? I would kind of want him to hang out there, right? I don't want, no, don't pass over. Stay if there's a destroyer. So we've often, you know, because God presents this whole story in 2 ways. On the one hand, he says, I'm going to take down or strike the firstborn of Egypt. But he actually gives us a little clue that it's not really him. It's this other person that we have called the angel of death. If you look at different translations, the death angel, the angel that brings death, the destroying angel. In Hebrew, the word there is mashchit. What is mashchit? It is a destroyer, from the word lehashchit, to destroy. So he says there's this person, it's not God. Obviously he can't do it without God's permission, but he's the mashchit. He's the destroyer, and he's the actual killer here. He is the one that's going to take the life of the firstborn of Egypt if you don't have the blood on the doorpost of your house. Now, we see this again in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. It mentions, verse 10, it mentions this destroying angel as the one who brought the plague on the Israelites in the wilderness. It says, and do not grumble, as some of them did in the ancient Israelites, and were killed by who? The destroying angel. So in Hebrew, it doesn't say angel. This is now in Greek. We're now in the New Testament. But it is an angel, probably, definitely a fallen angel. We'll see that later. But many scholars also see this same destroying angel, the one from Exodus chapter 12, in 2 Samuel 24. What does it say? There it is. It says, so the Lord sent a plague on Israel from that morning until the end of the time designated, when 70,000 people from Dan to Beersheba, that's how you say all Israel, 70,000 people from Dan to Beersheba died. when the angel, that would be the mashchit, the destroying angel, stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem. And then it says that it stopped when David saw the angel who was striking down the people, and he said to the Lord, I have sinned, and it stopped the plague. In Psalm 78, we get a deeper clue about this whole idea of destroying angels. And speaking of what happened on that first Passover, it says this, he unleashed against them his hot anger, his wrath, his indignation and hostility, a band of destroying angels. Did you hear that? Not just one destroying angel, the mashchit, but a band, a group of destroying angels. It says in the Hebrew, malachei ra'im, evil angels, or angels of evil. And he's referring to the death of the firstborn in that passage. Now, while there is a main destroyer, it seems that he brings some of his friends with him, and they do this work of evil as well. Now, I want you to go to Revelation chapter 9. Now, again, we're talking about this destroyer. We're talking about this mashchit. Now, I will bring it back to Passover, and you're going to be blessed. Just trust me, hang with me. But first, we got to look at a very bizarre passage in Revelation chapter 9. It says that the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss, or hell, the place down there. Now, when you think about a fallen star that has the key to hell, that makes you think of what? Well, it makes you think of Lucifer. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, it talks about how Lucifer got from heaven to earth. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to earth, you who once laid low the nations. And the idea is that God cast out a third of the angels from heaven to earth for rebelling against him under the leadership of the archangel Lucifer. So I believe that this mashchit is Lucifer. He comes down, and the idea in Revelation 9 is that God is still using Satan as this mashchit, this destroying angel. Let's read the rest of the passage. Let me go there. So the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star had fallen from the sky to earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss, or hell. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke of a gigantic furnace. The sun and the sky were darkened by the smoke of the abyss, and out of the smoke locusts came down to the earth and were given power like that of scorpions. So these are pretty creepy locusts that come to the earth, and they have power like scorpions. It gets worse. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant, so they're environmentalist locusts. But again, it gets creepier. And they could not harm those who had the seal of God on their foreheads. Now, I want to say something about that. That's you and me. Now, I believe that the believers will go through the great tribulation, that we will be raptured at the coming of the Lord, meet him in the air as he returns. Or else, who are these people who get the mark on the forehead that protects us? So you've got these creepy locusts that can harm things, but they can't harm those who have the seal of God. What's the seal of God? Obviously, it is the blood of Yeshua. It's those who are in the faith. Let's keep reading. They were not allowed to kill them. Where'd I go? But they were allowed to harm only those who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months, which is interesting. That is the lifespan of a locust. And the agony that they suffered was like that of a sting of a scorpion when it strikes. During those days, people will seek death, but they won't be able to find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. It's going to be a difficult time on earth. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads, they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. These are very dangerous, creepy locusts. Their hair was like women's hair, but their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of the wings was like thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, and their tails had power to torment people for 5 months. They had, now just hang with me here, verse 11, they had as king over them who? the angel of the abyss. What do you think his name might be? Whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, destroyer, or in Greek, Apollyon, also destroyer. So here we've got this mashchit that we first meet in Exodus chapter 12. He is the one that has been given authority by God to strike down the firstborn, but he's not a good guy. He's a fallen angel, and he's got a band of evil angels, and they work to kill people. They are utterly evil. And now we see him coming back at the end of the age during the Great Tribulation. He can't just... I get excited here. Just like in the Passover story. By the way, Passover and the Great Tribulation, they're almost identical. You've got plagues, right? The plagues of Egypt, the plagues in Revelation. You've got the believers in Goshen were protected, or rather the Jews in Goshen were protected. We will be protected as believers. There is the Pharaoh, there is an Antichrist. There is Moses the Redeemer, and there's ultimately Yeshua the Redeemer, but also the two witnesses on earth who will protect many of us. They breathe fire against their enemies. There's so many parallels, but the parallel I want you to understand right now is that during the Great Tribulation, or rather during the Exodus, or the plagues leading up to the Exodus, the Jews were protected. They were protected from all of the plagues. You will be protected during the Great Tribulation. So when I say you're going to go through it, and I believe you will, don't be afraid. I believe we're going to see a great harvest, even in the midst of this craziness. But we see in the midst of this mashchit, this destroyer, Apollyon, who has power to torment people through these locusts. Now, let's keep going here. So now I want to take us into the main part of our message. Let's ask ourselves, does Passover or Pesach really mean passing over? And I'm going to say no. I think it means something else. Over the years, we call this holiday Passover. And don't worry, when I meet with my family on Friday night and we all gather together and we go through the Passover Seder, I'm not going to get on a soapbox and tell them they've got the wrong name. Well, first of all, we'll be using the Hebrew word Pesach because we'll do it in Hebrew. So that won't be the issue. But I'll tell them, I won't tell them, I might tell them that you don't know what Pesach means. Now, how can it be? Who am I, Ron Cantor, a native-born English speaker? What gives me the arrogance to tell Hebrew speakers that they don't know what a word means? Well, you have to understand something about the Bible. There are certain words in the Bible that are used hundreds and hundreds of times, and there's just no controversy over what it means. And that's because even though Hebrew was a dead language for many, many years, many centuries, and by dead I mean it wasn't spoken. Nobody woke up in 1756 and said, Boker Tov, Ma Nishma, Ma Koreh. They didn't use it as that kind of a language, which means good morning, what's up, how you doing? They didn't do that. The only time they would read Hebrew would be in the synagogue, reading the Bible, hearing it read to them, or in the Siddur, the prayer book. But it was not an everyday spoken language. So when it became an everyday spoken language, we had to kind of resurrect it, and we had to create a lot of new words. You know what? There was no word for iPad. Can you believe that? Isn't that crazy? There was no word for iPad in Hebrew until recently, and now we call it padim. Padim is plural. So it's pad. That's how we say it. There was no word for telephone. There was no word for television, computer, so we had to come up with words. And sometimes we would just use the English words, like telephone is telephone. But a computer is not computer. It is machshev, from the word lachshov, to think. What does it do? What does the computer do? It thinks. So we're still inventing this language every single day. And so when you have a word in the Bible that isn't used a lot, you have to look at where is it used? How many times is it used? What do we think it means? And one of those words is Pesach. Pesach is used. How many times do you think this word's in the Bible? I'm going to tell you in just a few minutes. Or maybe I'll tell you now. It's only 7 times in the Bible. And out of those 7 times, 3 of those times is in it's in this passage. So out of the 7 times, you got to X out 3 because we're trying to figure out what those 3 words mean in Exodus chapter 12. Are you with me? So there's only 4 other opportunities within the entire Bible to figure out what does this word mean. And it's an important word because all over Israel and all over the world, Jewish people, every April, celebrate the holiday of Pesach. All right. Now, with most holidays, like Christmas or Hanukkah, you know exactly what you're celebrating. There's even Hanukkah, we know what the word means. It means dedication. It was about the rededication of the temple. But again, this word Pesach, it's just 7 times in the Bible. And let me just say this. There is a perfectly good word that we could have used if indeed we wanted to say Passover. La'avo, which is actually used in the text. If you go to verse 12, verse 12, the very first word is ve'avarti, which is I will pass over. Ve'avarti ba'aretz Mitzrayim. I will pass over the land of Egypt. If God wanted to say pass over, I'm going to pass over your houses, he had the word that was already right there in the very passage. But then he changes it in verse 13. From verse 12 to verse 13, verse 12, he says, Avarti ba'aretz Mitzrayim b'layla hazeh. On that night I will pass over the land of Egypt. And then he says, when I see et adam upasachti alechem. So we've interpreted that when I see the blood, I will pass over them, with them, their houses. But why not just say ve'avarti? I will pass over. That's what he said in verse 12. But he changes it. See, I think it doesn't mean that. I don't think he was saying, I'm going to pass over Egypt, and then when I see your house with the blood, I'm going to pass over that. In fact, again, going back to what I said earlier, if there's this guy out there called the Mashchit, the angel of death that we see in Revelation 9, and he works with these creepy scorpion locusts, I don't want God to pass over my house. I want God to live at my house. I want God to be over my house. So when the angel of death gets there, it's not just the blood, but he sees Yahweh, God Almighty, and he's like, all right, I got to get out of here. Because the Mashchit is the destroyer. He is submitted to Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, Yahweh, the God of Israel. All right, I've already given you a hint of what I think it means, but we're going to go and look at this word in a few different places. Are you guys still with me? Are you there? Just shout. Just write, I'm still with you in the comments if you're still with me. I hope this isn't, I don't know, too much. It's exciting to me, and it's going to get more exciting. All right. Now, let's go ahead and look in, I'm just going over some of my notes here. Let's go ahead and look at the other 4 times and see how this word is used. So when a word's used only 7 times, there's not a lot of information. And we already said 3 cases, it's the Passover. So number 1 would be 1 Kings 18. So Ahab sent word, verse 20, throughout all Israel, assemble the prophets on Mount Carmel. And Elijah went before the people and he said, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. What do you think is the word there that's translated Pesach, which we think means Passover? Where does it fit in there? Let me read it again. Just think about it. Which English word do you think comes from Pesach? I'll read it again. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel, assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. If you're guessing waver, that is it. Now, let's think about that word, waver. What does it mean to waver between 2 opinions? In Hebrew, I think we would say lehit labet, to go back and forth, to be indecisive. And what do you do when you waver? You don't move. You don't go forward. You're moving a little bit. This is wavering. I'm thinking, should I go left? Or left, are we that way? Left, or should I go right? You're making movement, but you are not moving out. You're definitely not passing over. So there's a little bit of hint, right? Let's keep looking. Now we're going to look in, I seem to have lost the other 2 places. One, it has to do with walking with a limp. So again, somebody, I think it has to do with Mephibosheth, where he walked with a limp because he was injured. And again, when you walk with a limp, you're not moving. It's not a consistent move. Now, let's go ahead and go back let's look at the one last place in Isaiah chapter 31. In chapter 31, verse 5, it says this. Now, read it in Hebrew. It's easy enough for me to say, Kitzparim afot ken yagen Adonai tzevaot al Yerushalayim ganon vehitzil pasach uhimlit. Let me read that in English. Like birds hovering overhead, right? Did you get that? You got birds hovering overhead. Like birds hovering overhead. So in the same way that birds will hover overhead, the Lord Almighty will shield Jerusalem. He will deliver it. He will pass over it, Pesach, and he will rescue it. That's what it actually says in the NIV. It makes no sense. Like birds hovering over Jerusalem, the Lord will shield it, deliver it. The last one is rescue it, and the one before that is and pass over it. No, when I grew up in America, we used to have this thing on Sesame Street, and those of you in America know what that is. It was a kid show, and it was always, one of these things is not like the other. Well, one of these words is not like the other. I'm going to shield you. I'm going to deliver you. I'm going to rescue you, and I'm going to pass over you. That doesn't make sense. Pesach clearly does not mean pass over. Let's go back to the beginning of the verse again. What does it say? Like birds hovering overhead. Remember what we learned in 1 Kings 18? How long will you Pesach, waver between two opinions? Wavering is like hovering. Now, it's different in that context, but you can see the similarities in the word, right? Now, let's go back to Exodus, and let's assume that Pesach means waver, or rather hover, right? In a protective way, a protective hovering, because that is the meaning in Isaiah 31:4. As birds hover over, I, the Lord, will hover over Jerusalem and shield you, protect you, and deliver you. So in Exodus 12:23, it says, when the Lord goes throughout the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the tops and sides of your door frames and will hover over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Now, why do people think it means Passover? I'll tell you why. Because they confuse the fact that there are two individuals in the story. There is God, Yahweh, and there is the destroyer. Because earlier in the passage, God says, I will strike down, or in the story, I will strike down the firstborn. And because they assume God is the one striking down, then he must be the one passing over. No, it is the devil that is going to pass over. So it is kind of funny when we celebrate Passover. We can still call it Passover, but we're rejoicing that the enemy, the mashchit, the destroyer, he passed over our home. Why did he pass over? Because he encountered Yahweh. And what was Yahweh doing? He wasn't passing over. He was hovering over your house with a sword, with a shield, with protection. Pesach means to hover. So it doesn't make for an exciting title for a holiday. You know, what are you doing for Hovering Day this year? We're going to bring the family over. It's going to be great. And we're going to read the story about when God hovered. But it's an awesome imagery. And it's the truth. I've proved it to you. I think I have. I think I've done a good job at what we call exegesis of interpreting a passage. We did a word study. That's how you do a word study. You look at the original meaning, and then you don't just look at Strong's Concordance. You look at all the different ways it's used. And then you look at context. So wavering in 1 Kings, and then you see it's translated Passover in Isaiah 31 verse 4. But it makes no sense, because deliver, to shield, and to rescue doesn't make sense with passing over. But it does with hovering. So that's what's happening. Let me read the passage again from you. When the Lord goes throughout the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the tops and sides of the door frames and will hover over your doorway. No, he won't pass over. Thank God that you did not pass over our homes, Lord. You hovered over our homes, and you did not permit the mashchit, the destroyer, to enter our homes and to strike us down. Now, M.G. Klein, if I'm honest, that's who I got this from. I was studying biblical Hebrew about a year ago, and at the end of each chapter, they give a little kind of a vignette. And this was one of them, and I thought, okay, that makes a little bit of sense, but you've just blown my mind because I've been celebrating Passover it'll be 56 years this year. And so let me study this more and see if this really makes sense. And it does. Here's what he says. The wonder of grace deepens when we recall by reason of his personal presence his personal hovering presence, Pesach, over the Israelite houses, the Lord himself, and again, Yahweh in the Old Testament, the angel of the Lord, that is the pre-incarnate Yeshua, was shielding and sheltering Pesach, the people of Israel. The lamb, the Passover lamb, the Pesach lamb, is the Pesach lamb because the Lord Yahweh is Pesach. He's hovering over us, protecting us. So I hope that blesses you, because that's the meaning of the Passover lamb. It's not that God passed over the homes. It's that he didn't pass over. He did the exact opposite. It's the mashchit, it's the enemy who passed over. So now have that imagery. You have the blood of Yeshua on you 24/7, every day of the week, of the year, all time. He doesn't take holidays. There's no days off. God hovers over you to protect you, to bless you. Get that imagery in your mind, because the Passover story of the protection, that is a metaphor for how we live our life every day in Yeshua, in the protection of God. That's why when all my fellow Israelis were afraid to go to the cafes on Friday morning, it never entered my mind not to. Now, yes, I understood that terrorism is up, and I'm not dumb. I don't put myself at risk. But when I go to places, we just got back from Kenya. We tried to go to Romania, and then we travel all over the world, and I'm not scared. Why? Because God who poseach, that's the present tense, who poseach alai, or ot. We got to figure out the right preposition to use with it. But who poseach alai, he hovers over me. I love that. I love that imagery. So again, I don't know that if enough people worldwide will see this message and change the name of the holiday in English from Passover to hovering. It would be cool if they did. But that's not what I want. What I want is for you to see that. I want you to understand that. God loves you. He's hovering over you. He's protecting you. No matter where you are in the world, I know this world is crazy. There's war in Ukraine. Believe God. Believe for that protection. If you're in Ukraine, you need a miracle right now. You need this hovering presence. Claim that and believe God that and expect that. And in other places in the world, it's scary, but even in places that are thought to be safe, there is terrorism, there is weather changes, there's coronavirus. Believe God for his hovering Passover, Pesach presence to be with you. Amen? Father, in the name of Yeshua, I pray that we would do that we would enter in to that hovering presence. You are our Pesach, the hovering, sheltering, protective presence on us. In Yeshua's name, amen. God bless you. We love you. Happy hovering day. Go wish all your friends happy hovering day this Friday. We're going to believe God to hover over us in Yeshua's name.